In a glass-walled boardroom, a black CEO extended her hand across the polished table. The chairwoman, an embodiment of corporate power, simply smirked. She then lifted her palm and delivered the fatal line, "We don't shake hands with people like you." A deafening silence fell across the executives. A moment later, a few nervous, uneasy laughs cracked the atmosphere. Cameras, broadcasting the investor live stream, captured every single detail: the casual smirk, the dismissive wave, the quiet, deliberate humiliation. But the corporate titans in that room, those men and that chairwoman, were chillingly ignorant of one critical fact. The woman she had just so casually insulted controlled every single dollar tethered to the deal on that table. By the next morning, $2.4 billion would vanish without a single word of warning. The 47th floor boardroom of Langston Tower was a stark monument to control, all cold glass and arrogant silence. Around a table that mirrored their sharp-edged ambition, 12 executives sat poised. At the absolute head, Victoria Sloan, the powerful chairwoman of her empire, adjusted her papers like a supreme judge ready to deliver a crushing verdict. Directly across from her sat Ava Monroe, the composed and quiet CEO of Monroe Capital. Ava had forged her investment firm from nothing, building its strength one solid contract at a time. Today's meeting was the final stage of a massive $2.4 billion merger, a deal with the power to completely reshape the industry. But for Victoria Sloan, this wasn't mere business, it was a stage for her cruel corporate theater. Her intent was clear: to humiliate her guest before the curtain closed. When Ava rose and extended her hand as is customary, Victoria Sloan leaned back. Her lips curled into a smile that never once touched her cold eyes. "We don't shake hands with people like you," she declared, her voice slicing through the glass and chrome atmosphere like a shard of ice. The room froze. A few of the men exchanged frantic, nervous glances. One awkwardly cleared his throat. Another, shamefully, smirked in support of his boss's prejudice. The moment hung in the air, painful, agonizing, and absolutely deliberate. The investor live stream cameras meticulously recorded it all: the outstretched hand, the pointed insult, the laughter that shamefully followed. Ava's hand remained perfectly steady for a brief heartbeat before she lowered it, slowly. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Her silence was not a sign of weakness, it was a precise calculation. "Understood," Ava said softly, regaining her composure and returning to her seat. Victoria smiled wider, visibly savoring her petty, cruel victory. "Now that we're clear on protocol," she said, dripping with condescension, "let's proceed." As the meeting continued, Victoria's tone became sharper, laced with subtle, practiced corporate cruelty. With every slide, every number, every projection Ava presented, Victoria cut her off mid-sentence, publicly corrected her analysts, and coldly ridiculed Monroe Capital's valuation model as merely aspirational. The men chuckled, feeling emboldened by their chairwoman's arrogance. It was the epitome of corporate snobbery wrapped in brittle civility, suffocating and expertly delivered. But Ava Monroe did not raise her voice. She simply took concise notes. She watched every condescending smirk. She carefully memorized every single face. When Victoria leaned forward and delivered a stinging personal blow, "You'll learn, Miss Monroe, that this industry doesn't reward emotional ambition," Ava simply nodded. Yet, deep inside, something cold and devastatingly surgical was already in motion. At precisely 3:17 p.m., during a planned recess, Ava stepped into the hallway. She dialed one number. Her voice was low and perfectly measured. "Execute Clause 8.3. Effective immediately." There was no emotion in her voice, no unnecessary explanation. When she calmly re-entered the boardroom, the discussion resumed as if nothing had happened. Victoria barely spared her a glance. "Where were we?" she asked, deliberately ignoring the tension in Ava's profound stillness. Ava met her gaze directly. "At the part where arrogance becomes extremely expensive," she stated quietly. Victoria frowned, confused. "Excuse me?" Before Ava could reply, phones around the polished table erupted in a simultaneous buzz. One, then two, then all of them, screens glowing with stark red alerts. The CFO's face instantly drained of color as he frantically scrolled through an email chain. "Chairwoman," he stammered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Our primary funding, it's gone. Monroe Capital has withdrawn all investment. $2.4 billion. Effective immediately." The boardroom exploded. Disbelief, panic, and shouting executive voices clashed with one another. Victoria's rock-solid confidence shattered like glass under the sudden, immense pressure. She turned to Ava, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't." "I can," Ava interrupted, her voice soft but absolute. "Clause 8.3 was signed by your own legal team. It permits an immediate withdrawal if any act of misconduct is documented during negotiations. And since this meeting is live-streamed," her gaze shifted slowly to the quiet corner camera, "still recording, you've provided all the documentation I needed." Victoria's mouth fell open, but no words came out. Her face flushed violently red, then drained to a ghostly white. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she managed to gasp. "Yes," Ava replied, calmly. "I've protected my capital from contamination." Executives frantically whispered. The stock ticker on the wall began to tremble, numbers sliding sharply downward in real time. Within minutes, the headlines broke across every major financial network: Monroe Capital withdraws $2.4 billion. Sloan Industries in crisis. Victoria desperately gripped the edge of the table. "We can fix this. We can renegotiate." Ava rose to her feet. "There's nothing to fix," she said. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a consequence." Her tone was calm, chillingly quieter than the financial storm now roaring outside the windows. Victoria turned to her remaining board members, utterly desperate. "You're just going to sit there," she snapped. "She's destroying everything we've built." One of the executives spoke softly, his eyes cast down in sudden shame. "No, ma'am. You did." Ava gathered her portfolio. "For future reference," she said to the room. "Respect is always cheaper than recovery." She then moved toward the door. But before she left, she paused right beside the chairwoman, who was frozen in terrified disbelief. Ava's voice dropped low, meant only for Victoria to hear. "You thought power meant control. It doesn't. Power means choice. And I just made mine." As Ava Monroe calmly walked out, the cameras caught the serene reflection of her face against the glass. A powerful woman leaving a boardroom she no longer needed. Behind her, the empire of the arrogant chairwoman unraveled in real time. The markets plunged. Banks called in guarantees. By evening, Sloan Industries' valuation had collapsed by a devastating 38%. Investors fled like smoke through broken glass. By midnight, Victoria's face was plastered all over the news, the woman who lost billions with a single, prejudice-fueled sentence. Ava Monroe never gave an interview. She issued only one short, powerful statement: "Partnerships end when respect does." The next morning, the financial press called it the Handshake Collapse. Business schools would dissect it for years. But in quiet offices and boardrooms across the world, countless women who had once been dismissed replayed that clip and whispered Ava Monroe's name like a crucial warning. Because sometimes power doesn't need to roar. Sometimes, it simply stops shaking hands. If you believe respect can't be bought, prove it. Like this video, share it everywhere, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what moment hit you deepest. Subscribe to Story Fills today and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that expose arrogance and celebrate unstoppable dignity.